we started talking about, of course, we broke 1 week to talk about Shavuos. But 2 weeks ago, we were discussing the beginning of the Sefer Shmos. Of course, we're still waiting for that big celebration of Bereshis. We're going to have it this year, Leo Bereshis? Or we're going to have that celebration for Bereshis at all? Is that still? Oh. Any special plans yet, or just in the... A yacht, oh boy. Oh. Maybe you should get an airplane there. Here is talking about that the Jewish people are in Egypt and they are put into slavery, and beginnings of the great end are starting to take place. And it says in the Torah, the first phrase in the glossary sheet, Ve'elech ish mi beis Levi v'yikach espas Levi. A man went out from the household of Levi. We know Levi was the third son of Yaakov Avinu from Leah, and he had great descendants after him. The priests that served in the Holy Temple came from Levi. A man from the household of Levi went and he took the daughter of Levi, married her. Now it's very strange. It doesn't mention any names. A man from Levi went and he married a daughter of Levi. Doesn't say who the man was, doesn't say who the daughter was. Just says they both came from the branch of Levi. Of course, we know who this man was, as the Torah starts talking about afterwards. His name was Amram. And Amram was the father of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the lady that he took, Bas Levi, the daughter, was Yocheved. The question is, how come the Torah does not mention who they were? A man and a woman? You know who this man was? Amram. The man Amram, of course the word Am, the nation, high nation. Amram was one of the few people in the world who never did a sin. Can you imagine that? Amram never committed a sin. The father of Moshe Rabbeinu. Other people, very few people have that great attribute of the great Midah to say they never did a sin. That means they never said a word of slander against anybody, no gossip. They prayed like they should. They studied Torah like they should. Everything they did was perfect. And here you don't mention his name. Why not mention his name? There's no shame to him. It's a great person. Yocheved. She just talked about before. She gave her life, put her life on the line to save the Jewish babies. Why doesn't the Torah say what the name was? Later on, we'll come to the next parsha in Oorah, there it does say the name. After things were happening in Egypt, and the Jews were getting ready to leave, and the 10 plagues were coming, Moshe Rabbeinu was going to Paro, then it goes and tells us the whole thing about all the Reuven and Shimon and Levi, all the names and the men and the wives and the children, and here it keeps it a secret. And from here we learned a great lesson. We see in number 4, Moshe under Mikol Ha'adam. The Torah tells us later on in the 4th book in Bamidbar, Vayish Moshe under Mikol Ha'adam. He was the most humble person that ever lived. The most humble person. Interesting, goes together. The greatest man who ever lived, the greatest Navi, greatest prophet who ever lived, and the greatest humble person that ever lived. Very humble. The Torah is telling us a great lesson over here that Moshe Rabbeinu, his parents were the greatest of the great. Amram and Yocheved. But he did not go around bragging to everybody. No, my parents are. My parents are Amram. Never did a sin in the world. A lot of people rely on their family tree and people that are great, and they use that to take it easier for themselves. Well, I have such a great family, such great people, such parents. So of course I'm great. You know, my parents are the greatest in the world. Some people use that to make it easy for themselves, that they expect people to honor them. You're the son of them. You must be something special. Goes to the head a little bit. Moshe Rabbeinu did not rely on his parents at all. As far as he's concerned, he was a man. She was, of course, he respected them. But as far as the world is concerned, everybody who he associated with, he didn't go around saying, I'm the son of Amram and Yocheved. He didn't try to use them to bring up himself, his greatness. He worked on himself as if his parents were the same plain, simple people. Obscure, not know who they were. Person has to come to this world and use his koiches and his talents and whatever God gave him to the maximum, to work on himself, to have the greatest outcome of his actions, what he's able to accomplish, and not to rely on his parents or his family tree. They're so great, and therefore everybody has to respect me, and I don't have to work so hard because I have great parents. No. Moshe Rabbeinu, not iota. He was a person who realized he's in this world for a purpose, and he has to accomplish that purpose, and it's all up to him. Forget about your parents, how great they are. They're very great. They had their chance in this world, and they did the greatest. I got to do the greatest for myself, too. I have to be the greatest man, too, the greatest I can be. So therefore, in the beginning of the Torah is telling us, Moshe Rabbeinu, as far as he's concerned, his father didn't have a name, his mother didn't have a name. As far as he said, I have to be what I have to be. I have to work on myself to produce the greatest person I'm able to produce. Myself. That's how I'm responsible for myself, number one. For other people, I have to be responsible for other people too. But the number one obligation of a person is to work on himself to make himself the greatest possible. Later on, after Moshe Rabbeinu became so great, and God sent him to take Jews out of Egypt, because he was the greatest person for the job, there Moshe Rabbeinu, you know what he said? I'm not so great. It's because my parents, they were so great, and therefore they gave me such great chinuch, they trained me so wonderfully. After he became the humble person, after he worked on himself and made himself to the highest possible goals the person could come to, you think, oh, I worked on myself, look at me. No, by then he said, no, you know I'm so great because I have such great parents. Look what I would expect. It's not me. Amram is my father, Yocheved is my mother. So the two ends of the measuring stick. When he was starting off in the beginning, I have to work on myself. I'm not going to use my parents to make myself great. I have to make myself great. Once it becomes great, so then he can say, well, look, I worked so hard. I deserve to get a lot of credit for what I put into it. No. That's not really me. It's for my parents. I'm not so great. If it wouldn't be for my parents, I wouldn't. That is the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he could start off one way and end off a different way, seem to be contradictory to one another, but that's the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's why the Torah starts off in the beginning. It doesn't tell us who his parents were, because that's now how he started off his life. Later, when he came to his highest goal, then he started talking about his parents. So that's why the Torah puts it in such a way. Very great, important lesson for us to learn, that we have to use what God gave us to the maximum, to work on ourselves. If any talent that we have, any power that we have, any influence that we can have, any way to bring ourselves up and the highest standard where possible, that's what we're obligated to do. When a person comes to that, he can always say, well, I had such great parents, naturally. So that's how the Torah starts off when it discusses how Moshe Rabbeinu was born. I think mentioned a few weeks ago that Moshe Rabbeinu was married to Yocheved from before. This was not the first time that they got together. But he left her. He left Yocheved because Pharaoh made the decree that all the boys have to be put to death. And he decided that it's not worth being together with his wife to have children if they're just going to be put to death afterwards. He'd rather not have the children altogether until God has rachmim, mercy on his people, and that decree will be rescinded. But till then, he's going to keep away and not have children. And we mentioned that time that Miriam, who was born already, the older sister, she said to Amram, to her great father, very strong words, like we mentioned last time, you are worse than King Pharaoh. You're worse than King Pharaoh. Because King Pharaoh only made the decree on the boys, and you are making it on the girls also. The girls are able to live. So if you're not going to be together and have children, not only you won't have boys, you won't have girls either. So that's not right. You have to do your best, whatever you bring into the world, and leave the rest up to God, what's going to happen. But this is not right. If Pharaoh is going to murder the boys, he's not going to murder the girls. And you don't have a right to abstain and keep away. You must go back. So that's what he did. Imagine that. We mentioned last time. He accepted the rebuke of his daughter, Miriam, who was a very great woman, actually. Miriam, she was a prophetess, Miriam. One of the greatest of women and the Torah talks about. Yocheved, her mother, Miriam. And he took her advice. And he went back and took Yocheved. He got together with her again. And he wanted to have children, like Miriam said. The problem was that Yocheved, guess how old she was? She was, we have written down over here. Can I put down over here? All right, Kuf Lamed. She's 130 years old, Yocheved was. 130, Bas Kuf Lamed Shana. So at that point of her life, she wasn't exactly at the childbearing age to have children. And God made a miracle that she returned to her youth and she was able to have children. Now, we see in number 3 that Yocheved was the aunt of Amram. He was the aunt because we know that Levi had 3 children. We have put down over here. Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. Number 3. The Hadassah is aunt because the children of Levi were Gershon, Kahas, Merari, and Yocheved. There are 3 boys and a girl that Levi had. And Kahas had Amram. So Amram, if he married Yocheved, that was his aunt. Now, according to Torah law, you're not allowed to marry your aunt. You cannot marry your father's sister or your father's brother's wife. We just read not long ago in the Torah all the forbidden relatives that are forbidden to marry. One of them is an aunt. So what's Moshe Rabbeinu doing marrying his aunt? Such great people. So the answer is before the Torah was given. Torah was not given yet at that time. And therefore, there was no prohibition for him to marry his aunt. The Bnei Noach, the non-Jewish people have 6 forbidden marriages. Well, not called marriages. Intimate relations with one another. And I wrote it down over here in number 6. The 6 are a mother, aim, his father's wife. In other words, his father married another woman, and he's from a different wife of the father. She's forbidden for a ben Noach, for Noah, one of the Noahite laws. Eishes ish, a married woman, is forbidden for a non-Jew to marry. A sister from the mother, a sister from his mother, a zochar, another male with a male, and a behemoth with an animal. Can they have relations with they are the 6 forbidden relationships that is forbidden for a ben Noach. So an aunt is not one of those. A ben Noach, a non-Jew, is allowed to marry his aunt, and since the Torah is not given yet, so there Moshe Rabbeinu, Amram, was not forbidden to marry Yocheved, his aunt, because it was not forbidden yet for the Jewish people. Just like Yaakov Avinu married sisters. According to Torah law, a Jew cannot marry 2 sisters unless one of them dies. They can marry a sister, but when she's alive, and Yaakov Avinu married Rachel and Leah. So the same question, how come? The answer is because the Torah is not given yet, and therefore it was permitted for him to marry them. Of course, the question is that they kept the laws of the Torah before it was given, and we might discuss that at different times. There's a very deep meaning to that. So he married, these 2 great people got together, Amram and Yocheved, and they came together again. They were married from before, except he went away from her, but he got back together again now. Now we have a number 7, Parush Hoya Mi Mana. He was separated from her, and then he got back together. And number 8, I put your Gzeira, your decree is worse than the Gzeira of Paro. So they got together, she became pregnant, and she had a baby boy. And now the terror set into the house. What's going to be with this baby boy? They're going to kill him. They had very, very strong watchmen over the Jewish people. If anybody got married, they had to register with the officials of Egypt, and they would count the months from the time they got married and would check in case a baby was born. They would check after 9 months, and if a baby boy was born, they would take and murder the boy. They kept tabs on everybody. They made sure to keep a record of who got married. No one was allowed to get married without the permission of the Egyptians. So, what's Yocheved going to do? Well, it so happened that Hashem made her give birth, an early birth, after 6 months. And we know that after 6 months and 2 days, like the Talmud tells us, a baby can survive after 6 months and 2 days. So she gave birth early, 3 months early, and therefore the Egyptians used to check after 9 months. So she was able to hide him for 3 months. When he was born, we say, the Torah tells us, Vatera Aisa Kitoivhu. The mother, she saw him that he was good. Well, every parent thinks their child is good. What was special about it? So we have in number 10, this Mala Habayas Oorah. The house became full of light. Moshe Rabbeinu was born. All of a sudden, there was great light in that house. And that doesn't mean just a physical light, but there was a great holiness came upon that house. Moshe Rabbeinu was born. He was a little baby, but as soon as he was born, the house was different. You could tell there's holiness in the house, a purity in the house. I'm sure there was physical light in the house also. They saw right away that this baby is something different about him. Why was the house so full of light? We have number 11. Kodosh mi beten, neshama gavoya. He was a holy baby from the time he was born, because his neshama was a very high neshama. We know every Jewish person has a neshama. Every Jewish person has a soul. What is a soul? Well, we don't know exactly what it looks like because it's a spiritual creation, but it's a holy creation that God gives to every person that's born. Even non-Jews have a soul, not as holy as the Jewish soul is, but every person, animals don't have souls. Animals just plain bodies, physical bodies. They don't have a soul. They die, and the body disintegrates. That's the end of them. A human being who has a soul, when he dies, the body disintegrates, but the soul lives on, and every Jewish person has a soul. Now, these souls have different levels of greatness, and each soul has a special purpose in the world that gives the opportunity for a person to live by. And certain souls are higher than other souls. Of course, we talk in these books of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, we talk about different levels of souls that people have. They're closer to God, they're more holy, they're more pure, and all souls are great. We all mentioned many times the soul is greater than an angel. Souls are greater than angels. People are greater than angels. Angels are spiritual creations of God, and the soul is a spiritual creation of God, and it's even higher, in a higher level, higher pedestal, higher than an angel. But souls themselves have different levels. The soul of Moshe Rabbeinu was so high and so special and so close to Hashem that just being born in this world and having that soul, that's where the light came from. That's where the Kedusha, the holiness, even though he didn't do anything yet, he's a baby. He didn't have a chance even to serve Hashem yet. He's a baby, can't serve Hashem. He said, a person serves Hashem, he becomes holy, he does the laws of the Torah, becomes holy. He didn't have a chance to do any laws yet, he's a baby. But since he had this holy soul that God gave him, because he was destined to take the Torah for the Jews on Mount Sinai, to talk to God, so he had to have a special holy soul that he had. So therefore, when he was born, the whole house was full of light. This spiritual light, spiritual feeling of, he just walked into the house. It was a different kind of house. He walked in from the street. There's something special about that house. He just saw light, he saw holiness, he felt the holiness, and the mother right away saw this baby is destined for greatness, for something special. So she could not hide him any longer, because when the 3 months were going by, that she would start knocking on the door and saying, we got to inspect the house because we have a record that you were married 9 months ago, you got together. We have to check to see if any baby was born, and if he's a boy, we're taking him and we're going to kill him. That's what they were doing. And that's why Amram didn't want to get married again, get together again, because of that reason. And now the exact thing that he was fearful of is happening. The dreaded, terrorized knocking on that door, like we read about by the Holocaust. They used to come in the middle of the night, the Yimach Shemam, those SS people, knocking at people's Jewish doors and terrorizing them and pulling them out of their house and all the terrible things they did to them. That's what they, in the middle of the night, and when people knocked that terrible knock on the door, who knows, the murder is coming into the house. So that's what they're expecting at that time to happen. So what should she do in order to save this baby? Of course, you'll say, well, they were such great parents, they should pray to Hashem. Hashem, do something, help us, do a miracle for us. we're not supposed to rely on miracles. We have to do things in order to make what should happen to happen. We can't rely and say, well, Hashem, please, we have to pray to Hashem naturally to give us the right idea what to do to save ourselves and to do the right thing, but we have to take action. We can't just rely on Hashem that He should take over. Hashem put us in this world for us to do what we have to do and pray to Him to help us do what we have to do. So she had to find a way, how is she going to save this baby from the definite danger that he's about to face? And she came up with a plan, and I think by next week we'll discuss that plan, what she did for this baby, what he did. So I think we're ready for some questions now.
Okay. Questions in the room? We owe you one from last week, right? 2 weeks ago. He was waiting 2 weeks ago, and then he said it was too late because we were on overtime, so he held his question for 2 weeks.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
A couple of months ago, someone asked a question about hell and fire versus light. The way you answered it is, it's the light of the Bible. So,
Could you say the question again?
many months ago, someone had questioned, is hell hot? And you respond, hell.
Hot. Oh, yes.
Yes, and you responded, it's light from the Bible. So, do Jewish people believe in hell?
Okay, I don't recall the question and answer, but he says somebody asked something about is hell hot, and Rabbi Mintz answered that it's the heat in hell is the fire of the Torah. But the question, the secondary part of the question, which I think is the real question, is, do Jews believe in hell?
Yes, we do. Definitely, that's where the whole thing comes from in the whole world, where the Christians get it, where the Muslims get it from. Naturally, they take everything from Judaism. And we do believe in there's such a thing as, we call Gehenna in Hebrew, Gehinoim really is. And as a matter of fact, it was created before the world was created. Before the 6 days of creation, God created it already from before. And we look at it as a cleansing place for people in order for them to be able to go into the world to come and enjoy the great reward that a person could enjoy. Sometimes people in this world who are sinners, and the sins are very overwhelming, and they don't do tshuva before they die, they have to go through a cleansing period of Gehenna that we call hell in English, Gehenna, in order for them to be able to be prepared to go to the ultimate reward of people of eternal reward. So we look at it like somebody who, it's like a hospital where people go to, and you go to a hospital and you've a lot of people, a lot of pain in the hospital and a lot of moaning and groaning in the hospital, but even though it's hard to go through and listen to and experience, but we know that ultimately it's something that's necessary, and it's something that people, when they come out, they're grateful that they went in because it took care of them. And even though they went through a lot of pain and trouble when they were there, but it was all worth it because they come out healthy and able to face the world and do what they have to do. So that's how we look at Gehenna also, a person who did not conduct himself correctly in this world, and he did not keep what God wanted him to keep. So God wants a person not to lose out for the ultimate reward and the eternal reward. It's considered a place of preparation for a person to be able to get close to God and get that eternal reward that God wants him to get. So we talk about hell as fire. It's not a fire, physical fire in the way that we think about it, but it's a fire, it's a cleansing type of thing, a spiritual type of fire, and it's very unpleasant, and it's very difficult to go through, just like a person has to go through sometimes amputating their limbs to live, but it gives them, people have to go through different injections and so on that are difficult and painful, but in the long run, it pays off. And that's how we definitely believe in such things as Gehenna and hell, and that's the purpose of it.
Okay, we have an ethical quandary that was posed. That is, we know it's wrong to mislead people. It's genevas das, it's considered a form of theft, and it's just wrong to mislead people. How about a mother who wants her kids to eat vegetables and that they won't eat? So could she disguise them as something else so that they'll eat it? I happen to know somebody whose mother told him that broccoli tastes just like ice cream. He told me that was the last time he trusted his mother.
Well, if it's a good reason for misleading somebody, but you're really not misleading them, you're leading them. You're leading them by misleading, but it's ultimately it's for their own benefit that you're doing it for them. So in a case like that, even like I'm not allowed to lie, but when it comes to keeping the peace, or certain mitzvahs, you're allowed to lie in order to keep the peace. So it's a necessary evil to bring something good. So if a lie by itself, you're not supposed to lie. You're not supposed to mislead people, because if this just stays as a lie and misleading, that itself is no good. But if it's purposeful in order to bring to something good to come out of it, so that's not called misleading them. You're leading them the right way through misleading them. But really the ultimate goal is to do the best thing for them. So in many cases we permit that to do, to lie, to bring out something good in the future for somebody. Somebody else, let's say it's very sick, they have some kind of concept of taking a certain food, a certain medicine is not good for them, and they, whatever reason they have, it's a mishigas that they have, so you have to get them to take it to be healthy, so you're allowed to mislead them and tell them it's ice cream, but you want to tell them they should take it in order for their benefit. They should be able to be cured from or have relief from what's bothering them. So in cases like that, it's permitted because it's really for their benefit, and it's not misleading them, it's leading them through a sort of a short, instead of going straight to the thing, you go around in a crooked way to get to your goal. So you can get to the goal straight path, or you can go to a crooked path. You want to try to go on the straight path, but sometimes you have to go on the crooked path in order to get there. So in cases like that, it's permitted to do so.
So the ends justify the means?
In this case, yes.
Oh, in this case, okay, that's a qualification.
Not-
Okay, questions in the room?
Not in all cases, just in this case. Yes.
Mazal.
Mazal gets a mazal tov, I understand. Yeah, a
Thank you.
granddaughter, mazal tov, shalad nachas.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Rabbi, when Amram left his wife, when he parash from his wife, he's smart enough to know that he has to wait to his daughter to tell him that it's not good.
Okay, the question is, Amram, why did he listen to his daughter? Wasn't he smart enough to think about what he did when he did it? Especially he was such a wise man, he never sinned.
People are human beings, and people don't know everything. We have a klal that you say that a small match can make a big fire. So a small match, what's a little match? It's nothing, but it can make a big fire. And small people sometimes can come up with things that other people just don't realize. So we call Lamda Iskaltu, we mentioned last time, a person has to learn from everybody. Sometimes even a great person can overlook certain information, and like I mentioned last time, great people call in other people, discuss things with them, because by discussing things, sometimes things that are overlooked are disclosed by discussion, and even sometimes small people are able to say things that a big person didn't realize. So the greatest of the great, we say Yisro, we want to have a whole parasha called Yisro told Moshe Rabbeinu how to make the court system for the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu had one way of doing it, Yisro, and some of the great commentators tell us that the reason why the Torah tells us this whole story, the Alter from Kelm says, because to tell us this itself, that a great person should listen. Yisro was not nearly as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, but he gave this suggestion, gave this advice, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, that's good advice, I can listen to your advice. Sometimes a smaller person can understand something, see something that a big person does not see. And that's why all great people like to get others around him to discuss and to give their opinions. And that is the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was so humble. He wanted to hear what other people said, because that is something that a person always has to realize, that not everything does a great person know. It's important. Certainly, we have to take a lesson from there, that people not as great, certainly we have to listen to other people and get their advice. Sometimes it might say something. I think I said in the past, in Moshe King David, the great King David, he says, when my enemies stand up against me, I listen to what they say. Even my enemies, I listen to what they say. Because even his enemies said all kinds of terrible things about him, and all kinds of criticisms about him. But maybe they'll say something that's right. He even listened to his enemies, all the bad mouthing they said against him. He had a lot of enemies, David HaMelech, and he wanted to hear, what do you have to say? Maybe something of what they're saying, maybe I'll learn something from them. Learn from everybody. You have to learn, we can learn from animals, we learn different things. We learn from insects, we can learn from everything God created. There's chokhmah, there's great wisdom in everything that God created. And therefore great people look into everything to see if they can grow and get some new knowledge and great wisdom from God's creation, certainly from people.
Okay, we have an online question. The tribe of Levi was not subjected to the decrees in Egypt generally. They didn't have to didn't serve as slaves, etc.
Yeah.
Were they subjected to the rules about drowning the children?
Well, we see from here clearly that they were, because here we have Moshe Rabbeinu, who was a Levi, and they were subjected to that, to those decrees, because King Pharaoh was afraid, even his own people, as a matter of fact, for a short time, he had his own people kill their sons, because his stargazers saw in the stars that the Savior of the Jewish people was born that day, and therefore Pharaoh didn't say it will be Egyptian or Jewish. He had all the boys killed, even his own people he killed that day for a short time. So certainly the tribe of Levi, with the Jewish people themselves, he made sure to kill all of them in order that the Savior should not be able to grow up and take out the Jews.
Okay, questions in the room?
From one of the chats, why do so many Jews have beards? Is it a style or is there more to it? What about the curly payas and the other payas styles behind the ears? Is it rooted in Kabbalah or is it just a style or is there something about it?
Okay, beards and payos. Side locks, the curly ones, the ones behind the ears, the ones that don't have them behind the ears, are they fashion statements or are they religious statements?
Well, beards are a sign of maturity. So we consider that as a action of certain maturity of greatness of a person. Babies and young people don't have beards because they're not of age. They don't have their mind is not totally developed yet, and by beards, that's one of the ways of maturity. We say that a child who doesn't reach the age of 12 or 13 by boy and a girl, they're still considered minors, not responsible for what they do, not commanded to keep the laws of the Torah. When they start growing up and they start having hair growing, the hair is a considered part of, it's not enough to have years, but a person has to have a certain hair is also to grow to show maturity. So maturity on the beard is also the same thing. So it's considered a sign of a certain maturity and development of a person. So therefore, that's why Jews grew beards in the old times, and even today also. It's considered a certain time in the person's life that he, by growing a beard, it also gives him an awareness of himself, that he has to be careful with his actions because he's come to the maturity level of having a beard, and now his seichel and his understanding and it becomes more developed, and therefore God expects more from him the more mature a person is. So therefore, by having a beard, many people feel that this gives them a uplifting of their ideas, of their feelings, and they're more careful in how they have to act to themselves and in front of other people. Now the payas, the reason for that is because it's forbidden for a man to cut off his payas. So just like on a person's beard, you're not allowed to cut with a razor. If a person does cut his beard, it has to be not with a razor, only certain ways that it be cut, not according to Torah law. And the payas of the head, even without a razor, to make a person go around cutting off the sideburns is forbidden for a man to do. So therefore, some people are afraid that if they start cutting the hair in that place, they might cut it too close and cut it off altogether too much. Therefore, they say, I'm not going to touch it. Leave it alone, because I don't want to have go and have to take a chance of going against the Torah law of cutting off the sideburns. So therefore, just leave it the way it is, and they don't touch it in order not to come to the avera, the sin of cutting on one's sideburns. That's the main reason why they have those long sideburns. They don't want to touch it in order not. They're afraid that maybe they go too far, cut it too close. If you cut it too close, then it's no good.
Okay. Question is,
where is it written? It's written in the Parshas Kedoshim. Parshas Kedoshim, that's what we read a few weeks ago in Vayikra. In Kedoshim, it says that you're not allowed to cut your beard with a razor and not cut your sideburns. Pas Roshchem lo sakif. To quote exactly, sakifu paas Roshchem. You should not go around the sideburns that cut them off, and it's, the hair in the back and the front come together. You have the sideburns to make a interruption between the two.
okay, people say, online question, people say they believe in God, but yet we see that they sin. If they believe in God, how could they sin?
I wonder if the person asking the question believes in God, and would ask himself, how
I
come he sins?
assume that, I don't know.
Well,
It's very hard to know.
if he believes in God, I guess he never sinned, because he said, how could you sin? The answer is a few it's not a one answer.
He's looking for an excuse not to believe in God.
Person can believe in God. There's two steps in believing to God. It says in the Torah, two steps. You should know, and you should have it in your heart. Hashem Elokim, the God is the God. You should know it and have it. What is the difference knowing and having it in your heart? Knowing it means it's a fact. You can know a fact, but you don't have the feeling of it necessarily. We have a lot of facts, and people, let's say like Barbara went now to Europe and saw the camps, right? Before you went to the camp, you know about it. But once you go and see it, whoa, then you have a different feeling about it. Then all of a sudden it becomes real. And until then it's just a fact in your mind. And yeah, there's an Auschwitz and there's a this and yeah, and oh, it's terrible. But do you feel it? Do you really have a pain knowing that fact? Once a person goes and sees it, actual existence, then the feeling comes in. So the same thing, the Torah says you should know there's a God, but you should have the feeling of it. It's two different things. A person had the intellectual knowledge there's a God, but to realize that He's there, He's watching me, and everything I do He knows about, and He gives me reward and punishment. So this is something a person has to take to heart and to feel. And if a person is not feeling it, therefore, if he has the desire to sin, something is burning desire that he wants to do something, he goes by that pizza store, and it smells delicious. Maybe there's a little treif in there, maybe it's not treif in there, but I'm so hungry now and I can't. Well, probably it's okay. So the urge inside of a person can sort of sidetrack. He knows there's God, but he doesn't really have the feeling of it, doesn't have it part of his whole being, and therefore it's possible to sin because we don't see God in front of us. We have to work on it to bring Him into our life and feel that He's watching us, and that takes a lot of time and effort to feel God. If a person really feels God, then he can't sin. Then it's not possible to sin. Even then, a person sometimes can sin by talking himself into that it's not considered a sin. Sometimes a person has a big craving for something, and he knows there's God watching him, but he said, "Nah, that's really okay because somebody told me that store is okay. It's kosher. So I didn't really check it out, but I heard some." So a person can start answering himself away and talking himself into it, and I'm not sinning because really it's okay, but really what's driving him is his desire and his lust for the thing that he really wants to do, and it's not really, he's not using his intellect, his feelings and his character traits of desire are taking him over, and therefore he can even sin even though he believes in God. So these are two different ways how a person can sin even though he believes in God.
Okay.
Help me phrase it right. Let's say a religious Jew is driving to Shabbaton, to Oorah, let's say, and accidentally hits a deer.
He accidentally?
Hits a deer.
Hits a deer.
Yes. And, deer is not dead, but about to die and suffering. Is he allowed to kill the deer? We're going to pretend that animal control doesn't exist. And are you allowed to kill it or just let it die by itself?
Okay, question is somebody's driving to Shabbaton or here on Staten Island, the Torah spot, and they hit a deer. And the deer is dying, it's writhing in pain, and it's going to die. Is it appropriate to just let it die, or if the guy has a shotgun, should he be shooting the deer, taking it out of its misery?
Well, it's certainly permitted to kill the deer, naturally, and I would say that it's a mercy killing. We don't believe mercy killing for people. For animals, we know it's going to die, so if we're going to take it out of its pain, it would be, sometimes the person doesn't have the guts to do it, to take a gun and shoot it, so you can't say he's did a sin by not shooting it, but if he has the guts to do it and it's in pain, it certainly would be a good thing to do to take it out of its pain. Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, going back to the other question about when we were talking about sinning. So if someone does a sin, they know, like, let's say they know that the sin was wrong, but they really enjoyed, like, let's say they ate something that wasn't kosher, and they knew that they're eating something that's not kosher, and they know going in, but they're going to eat it anyways, and they eat it, and it tastes really good, and then afterwards, they don't feel bad about it because end result is they enjoyed it. It tasted good. So how does someone do teshuva when they can't say like, oh, I wish I didn't do it, because they're happy. Not happy they did it because they know it was wrong, but they enjoyed it.
Okay, there are 3 steps to repentance. And the first one is to acknowledge that the person to admit that they did something wrong. The second step is to regret what they did. And the third thing is to to commit not to do it again. Person really enjoyed what they did. That was a great sin. It was delicious ham sandwich. What can I say? Big Mac. They really can't say they regret eating it because they really enjoyed it. So how do they do tshuva when they don't really regret it?
They can't. They can't do tshuva if they don't feel they don't feel anything regret on it. Tshuva, the main thing of tshuva is regret. If
Well, they regret that they sinned, but they don't regret that they ate the sandwich.
No, I think she's saying that they regret that they sinned.
Right? She's saying no. She's saying they regret that they sinned. It bothers them that they sinned, but they really enjoyed that sandwich.
Well, it's always like that. A person does a sin that's enjoyable. It was enjoyable, but you regret. Will you do it again? So that's the question. If you to do a beginning of tshuva is regret. The next step is to say I won't do it again. So if the three steps of tshuva are charata, you regret, kabbalah, not to do it again, and vidui, to confess to the sin. So if a person regrets it, even though he enjoyed it, of course, the person always enjoys a sin. Usually, for someone of enjoyment, so he enjoyed it. But if they regret it, so it depends to what extent they regret it. It's enough that they'll say, "Well, I won't do it anymore. I regret doing it, even though it's geschmack and it's great and I enjoyed it, but God said not to do it, so I can't do it." So that's tshuva. So even though they felt good about it, of course, when it goes into the higher levels of tshuva, there are those who will take upon themselves a certain pain to counteract the enjoyment that they had. And that is in the higher levels of tshuva, to counter what you're saying, that they can't take away the fact they felt good about it, because they did feel good about it. They can do the tshuva by saying, I won't do it anymore. But to make it even a higher tshuva, they take upon themselves certain pain. They'll maybe fast half a day and not to eat. Maybe they'll keep back from eating certain food for a certain time. Or they'll do sometimes even more aggressive kind of pain to take upon themselves in order to counteract the enjoyment that they have from the Aveira. But that does not hold back from the tshuva. Tshuva is regret, take upon themselves not to do it anymore, and confess to the sin. That is called a tshuva shlema. If they have regret but don't accept and not do it anymore, it's something, but it's not called tshuva yet, not mitzvah tshuva. A higher level is to do something, do a mitzvah, which is difficult. To go out and maybe get up early in the morning against their feeling and go do a chesed, do a kind act to somebody. Some people need something. They want to do something to counteract the pleasure that they enjoyed. So now they take themselves something that is not pleasureful and it's a little painful, and therefore they can counteract that pleasure they had from doing the sin.
Okay, last question. Okay. No, go ahead.
If there is any adjustment to the Torah, for example, we know now that homosexuality is not malicious. Homosexuality is not malicious, and we know because they study homosexuality is not malicious. So there is any adjustment, and people will adjust the Torah?
Okay, the question is, I'm going to adjust the question a little bit. She's asking if there are adjustments to the Torah. She says that we know, and I would rephrase that to say psychologists today say that what used to be called a mental illness, called homosexuality, is now natural and it's not a matter of choice. 40 years ago or 50 years ago, they considered it mental illness. Today, psychologists believe, just like they believed then that it was mental illness, today they don't believe it's mental illness, today they believe it's nature. So now that they believe that, or they think they know that, should we adjust the Torah for contemporary theories, or is there no room to adjust Torah for theories of science? Is that the question?
Well, we never consider it mental illness. We consider that homosexuality is a sin, and it's not a mental illness. And a lot of things psychologists today want to say people are mentally ill about. We don't call it mental illness. We say that the person has free choice and he's able to control himself. Of course, there's such thing as mental illness. I'm not saying there's not, but many psychologists say today is not synonymous with Torah thought. And today...
So the question is, do we adjust the Torah to contemporary theories?
No, we adjust the world to the Torah, not Torah to the world. That's Torah is God's Torah, and God doesn't change, and His laws don't change. And many people try to change the Torah because of that. They say, well, Shabbos you can't light a fire because he used to rub two stones together, so it was very hard to make a fire. But today, just strike a match. Well, that's okay. So that's ridiculous that we don't give reasons why you can't eat pork because it has that kind of trichinosis to it. Therefore, that we don't believe in those things. That's people try to answer the Torah. That's not the reasons. But God had His reasons for the Torah. They're spiritual reasons. We cannot change the Torah according to science. As a matter of fact, science is always changing. Today they say don't eat eggs, and tomorrow they do eat eggs. Don't eat this and don't eat that, and they're changing all the time. So certainly they themselves are changing all the time. But the bottom line is that the Torah is infinite, Torah is eternal, and it's nothing to be changed. God doesn't change. We have to put our lifestyles into the Torah, not to turn to our lifestyle.
Okay, that's it for tonight. We'd like to wish Rabbi Mintz a mazel tov. He won't be here next week.
Oh,
We will be having some sort of class, but Rabbi Mintz will not be here. His grandson is getting married next Tuesday night. So we'd like